Hi everyone, how are you doing? I am so excited to join not just you, but also so many old friends and new friends from St. Thomas. This is a very exciting time for me because this made me sit down with my journal and think a little bit about those amazing years at STU, and I really can't think of happier times. Um, so as our hosts have mentioned, I went to STU. I studied political science and human rights, and I am also from Ecuador. So I was one of I think the first Ecuadorian international students coming to STU, and I think that many others follow. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my career, because at first sight you would think that it's a very strange career, and definitely it's strange to my family and to many people that probably don't really understand the way careers develop nowadays. But yes, of course, I studied human rights. Then I went on to study international human rights law, and had a long and fruitful career in 5 continents. I worked in Tanzania and in Thailand, and of course in Latin America and in Central America. And then had a point in my life when I was doing advocacy at the United Nations in Geneva. And now if you ask me, it's like, oh, well, clearly you're still working on human rights. And my answer is no. Actually, I live and work in Ecuador. I started my own business, and now I'm a business lady, businesswoman. uh, and yeah, and only last year I had the honor of being named as one of the top 100 business women or business people in the country, in Ecuador. Definitely the youngest one, and definitely one of the few women. But yes. My career has had many twists and turns. I can tell you that. So the way what I wanted to share with you today is probably like, how does a human rights lawyer become a business person, and and has all these options open. And I think that probably my best answer is that I started off with the right foot, and I had a liberal arts education to start with. I don't think that my mind or my imagination of what I can do professionally would be what it is without having studied for 4 years at STU. Because even though you have these declared majors, you have political science and human rights, I did a minor in philosophy. What STU gives you in terms of education is what you need to be a whole person. So my short talk for you today is 4 moments I lived at STU that made my life and career follow my calling. And the first part, the first moment I remember is actually the first day at school. I remember Professor Malcolmson getting up there and giving us a welcome. We were all doing, all dressed up and ready for our first day at school. And he was explaining um, how and what to do with regards to picking our courses. So in that first that first semester at school, you have a lot of pressure to think, oh my gosh, each course I take could make a huge difference in my entire life. So what if I take the wrong one? I don't want to waste my credits. I don't want to take too many credits. I don't want to take too few. And it's actually a nerve-wracking situation, and it's a circumstance that you will face all of your life, because between like having the FOMO, like the fear of missing out of all these other amazing courses, and also like thinking you're probably either not good enough, or maybe like questioning yourself if this is the right thing to do, really picking those few courses that you can take and can handle the first semester is really hard. And I remember Professor Malcolmson saying, you know what, explore with honest curiosity. And it's almost like, having this person of authority coming and telling us and giving us permission to explore with honest curiosity was the best thing that I could have heard at that point. Because everyone else in my life at that point was telling me, no, you need to focus, you need to narrow it down, you need to focus, you need to think about what is going to be the rest of your career, the rest of your life. And having that permission was incredible. And that was probably the best introduction to liberal arts education that I could have had. Um, that that first semester is what allowed me to really consider my options, and to start thinking about myself and about like the courses that I end up taking, not as thinking, oh, this is too hard for me or this is not for me. Instead of doing that, I started thinking, oh, wow, this is my calling at this point in my life now. And I'll tell you in a little bit why that made such a big difference in my life later on in my career, because I remembered that that really I'm in the driver's seat and I can actually choose what is it that I can do with my time and how is it that I want to spend it. The second point, the second moment that made a big difference in my life was when I realized at some point that good news, you are not the major you pick. You know, we heard earlier today from someone who studied great books. And what do you do with great books? What do you work on? And you know, I come from a family of where everyone is an engineer. And when you studied engineering, what do you do with your career? You become an engineer and work at places where engineers are needed and use those skills that you learned in very practical ways. And that's fantastic because it's very clear cut. But life is not clear cut. And I think that people that end up studying liberal arts, or having a liberal arts education end up understanding that that actually the options are endless. And in a world today where really you are needed in different facets in your life in different ways, you know, knowing that you're not the major you pick is a huge relief. So I guess it was that second moment of relief, and I think that I realized it when I think that we had a class in a philosophy class, and we had some sort of like guest speaker who had studied philosophy, but that did nothing to do with philosophy. She was actually working at a nonprofit, at a local nonprofit in New Brunswick, and she told us about the amazing work that she was doing. And I was thinking, oh wow! So I guess reading Aristotle can actually lead me to live this life where I could make a living out of following my purpose and making an impact. And I think that's when I decided, okay, this is my calling, and I loved discovering that. And then I guess the third point when I learned was just like, okay, you know, I discovered my impact, my impact on my calling. So I started working really hard. I took too many courses. I was involved in a lot of activities and societies and clubs, and I was really happy. But at the same time, I realized that that I was probably burning myself out. I was suffering from the other side of it, which was just, you know, giving my entire self to that cause, and volunteering and working, and I remember that when that moment came, which was about my third year of university, the fact that I had the support groups and the friendships and people who cared for me and professors that knew me by name because the class sizes are so small, that collection of people that were my community there reached out to me and said, take care of yourself first. And I don't know if it was a coincidence or if just like all the stars were aligning, but just at that time we were reading books that also talked a lot about building yourself up first before going out into the world and doing what you think is right. And I remember that stayed in my heart because I knew that it was moment to stop, recalibrate, and really work on myself, and that make a difference, a huge difference way down the line. So I'm going to fast forward because then I had a career. I studied human rights law. I started a nonprofit. I worked with refugees in Africa and Asia and in Latin America. And I worked for many years as in the first line of defense. I was really doing like direct assistance with refugees, direct legal assistance. So I was at one point, I think like way over what is the recommended amount. I was probably handling 3 or 4 additional cases per day. And I was working really hard, and I came really close to burnout. And that's when I realized that maybe at that point, I was not really following my my potential, and I realized to take a step back and to start to work more on nonprofit management rather than first line of defense. And I don't think I would have made that decision. I think I would have burned and crashed without having had all the background, advice, knowledge, and studies that I had having had a liberal arts education back in that third year of university back then. And I guess like the fourth one is just like learning to understand what my calling is now. I think that many books and novels and sometimes like Hollywood movies make us think, oh, you know, this person has this one purpose in life and is going to give everything to that for their entire life. And we're definitely way past the times when you will have a calling to be, I don't know, like a post office person or a post office employee and work in the post office for 50 years and then retire. I think we're at that point in life where when not only technology but society not only allows us but encourages us to follow our calling at the point in life when you can make the most for that. And if I fast forward again, like after I became a nonprofit manager, I ended up having a really amazing job. I was doing direct advocacy at the United Nations for the nonprofit I helped co-found in Geneva in Switzerland, and I really like thought I had really achieved the top of my career, and I was quite happy, to be honest. But at the same time, I had this like little inkling that started growing over 2 years, where I started like remembering, okay, what is happening back home? What is happening back in Ecuador? And things were not good. We started experiencing what people later in the United States, and maybe I don't know if it's the case in Canada, but what people would call this polarization of society, right? People were so focused on being either part of like I don't know, like a party politics left or party politics right, that dialogue was no longer happening. People in my country were really at it, and like not only their discourse had become more violent, but also violence was happening between people of warring factions. And I was observing and hearing and talking to my family and knowing that families and neighbors and people who were friends that were now fighting because of this polarization of society. And I don't think I had realized, I would have been able to realize and to put like those lens of what is happening back home without the very solid education I got on political science here. Because at STU, political science is of course as much science as it is an art, and understanding that politics is an art of being human and of human needs, and also of what it means to be part of a society. I don't think I would have understood what was going on if I hadn't had that background. And that's when I decided that my new calling was to come home and see what I can do, and to see if I can rescue the center a little bit more, if I can build up more options for people to have dialogues, and really, to work with people like my little sister, who was 10 years older, who really felt like she wanted to make a difference in the world, but the space wasn't allowing her, and you had like this entire generation of people that were thinking that they had to pick one side or the other in order to make a change. And that, my friends, is how I returned to Ecuador. I don't think I would have made that decision if I wasn't so solidly committed to following my passions. It was not easy. It was not understandable for many around me. My friends, my family were like, what? You're going to abandon your dream job in Geneva working on human rights? And you really follow an idea, because I had no clue what I was going to do. And that's when I moved to Ecuador. So I moved back home with this idea of starting a social enterprise, getting into business. But I didn't want to get into business as usual, because a lot of us that follow the path of doing good for people tend to think that business is not a good thing. We grow up thinking that corporations can be evil and all they want is money. But I decided to explore creating my own company, but it would be a company that had a mission. So it would be a company like a nonprofit, and that would have a mission to create a space for people to build in the middle. So people that can believe that business can be a force for good, and at the same time, people who had the public good in mind, that can mobilize and can use business as the vehicle to make a difference. So this sounds very theoretical, and I had to come to Ecuador and explain it in very plain terms to people around me and investors, and say, this is going to be a good business. This is going to create wealth for you. And I think that that's my experience, having understood from the very first day of school that exploring with honest curiosity, that understanding that you know, that your major is not your life, and understanding that self-care first was part of the journey, I was able to put all of these things together and convince a group of people to invest in this business, and we called it a co-working space. But really, it's so much more than that. It's so much more than putting together a group of, I don't know, colored poofs and Wi-Fi in a nice space for people to work together. It was a space, a physical space, to welcome people that wanted to make a change. And that was 7 years ago. And then today we are on the other side of the pandemic. We've survived the pandemic because the community has been so loving and so supportive, and we've been able to navigate all these really difficult waters to continue to be not just a co-working space. Now we're also kind of like an university for social enterprises. We accelerate social enterprises. Our graduates have raised over $60 million for their companies, and they have impacted about 2.4 million people positively. The companies that we accelerate and that we build up in Ecuador not only create wealth for their investors, but most importantly, help people you know, have better health. They help people have more dignified, just jobs, and also promote fair trade and better for the environment. I am so excited to tell you this because even last month, we decided to make a big leap. So here I am, a human rights lawyer that had a lot of difficulties with doing numbers back then, who was able to reinvent herself. And now last month, we launched our first impact investment fund, and we are well on our way to raising about 1/4 of the $2 million that we're raising to be able to invest in young people trying to make a difference. So I'm glad to also share those news. So why am I sharing all of this with you for? I mean, you're probably thinking, okay, St. Thomas for me, and why is this lady telling me about a business that she started in Ecuador? I don't know. I think it's just to help your imagination and help you think and imagine yourselves about what you could be. You don't have to be a business person. You don't have to be a human rights lawyer. But I remember being in your shoes many years ago. And I remember how hard it was to imagine myself, what I would be doing 10, 20 years down the line. And I can tell you that that there's no better decision to just keep those options open, because when the calling gets to you and you understand what your calling is, you want to be able to be prepared and have all the tools in your tool set to be able to respond and honor that call.